Hey guys, it's Lane with Tim's Nation. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about the DeathWatch army I'm bringing today, the DJ's Orks. I'm going to go through the DeathWatch list. For those of you that are new to the channel, this is my version of DeathWatch now, where I'm really taking advantage of the Tome of Ectoclades to reroll hits and wounds for a turn. I'm really fishing for devastating wounds, so it's my DevWatch. If you've been watching the channel and are familiar with the DevWatch, I've made a few little tweaks here, but we're still relying on a whole lot of Stern Guard, Devastator Centurions, Deep Striker Eradicators, that sort of thing. So, and as a special note, this exact list is what I ran this past weekend at an RTT at Sweets and Geeks in Medina, where I did end up taking first place, narrowly taking first place. I'm going to do a separate video where I talk through the games I played and the experience at the tournament. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out as well. But yeah, this is my tournament winning DeathWatch list. So it's the same exact list I brought this past weekend, now bringing in the DJ's Orks. This is something different as far as I haven't played an all vehicle matchup with this list yet. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm going to go through the list and we'll talk about how everything works together. All right, guys, this is the DeathWatch DevWatch list. It is DeathWatch. It is the Black Spear Task Force, so the DeathWatch specific detachment. It's weird. I don't have any DeathWatch specific data sheets in here. It's all just Space Marine stuff, but I'm taking full advantage of the DeathWatch strats, mission tactics, and the DeathWatch enhancements. Specifically, Tome of Ectoclades is a big deal here. So, for our characters, we have a captain, Phobos captain. The Phobos captain, his special ability lets me redeploy up to 3 Phobos units after we find out who goes first. This is super strong, of course, because I can use this to put a couple models out there, block my opponent's scout moves, block their infiltrate ability. So I have a squad of infiltrators and I have a lieutenant with combi weapon in the unit here. Them along with the captain there, all 3 of those are Phobos units. So I can take advantage of this. I can put the captain with the infiltrators and put them out in the middle of the table and kind of block out what my opponent can do. And then after the roll off, I can pull them back to a nice safe spot, keep that captain safe. It definitely lets me have some play. I definitely took advantage of this past weekend where I played against a guard player and he took fixed objective and took cleanse. He didn't have any deep striking, didn't have any indirect fire, so I just put the captain by himself back somewhere hidden, and then the infiltrators I put up on the front line, and I went first and just moved them forward and engaged one of his squads of guardsmen and basically blocked them up and prevented them from getting on an objective to cleanse. So it was definitely very useful to have that ability to pull them back if I needed to. So now the captain has the enhancement Tome of Ectoclades. Tome of Ectoclades is wild, guys. If any other detachment had to be out of control. But Tome of Ectoclades lets me once per game, after I pick my Oath of Moment target, I pick a second target, and then my whole army rerolls all hits and all wounds into both of those targets until my next command phase. So it definitely lets me be very hitty, very smashy, very shooty for one glorious turn into 2 specific targets. In this particular list, I'm taking a whole bunch of guns that have devastating wounds. So that means I just fish for devastating wounds and hope that I just roll a bunch of 6s and it does a lot of damage. All in all, in the list, there's 102 shots that have devastating wounds. Sorry, 103, because the lieutenant has a one-shot combi weapon that has dev wounds. So typically how I play this is I pick the 2 hardest targets and I bring in all my devastating wound weapons, pop off Tome of Ectoclades, and in a turn can put out 30 to 35 devastating wounds typically, on average. Then next we've got the Apothecary Biologist. The Apothecary Biologist gives his squad lethal hits. If his squad kills something in close combat, he gets OC 9, which is hilarious. He'll be accompanying the Eradicator, so not a close combat unit, but sometimes they pull it off. They might, in this game, they might be able to punch a bunch of Gretchen and power up his OC. The big reason we have him, though, in addition to his lethal hits, is that he has the enhancement Beacon Angelus, just gives his unit true deep strike. So he will give the Eradicators the ability to deep strike, and they can rapid ingress for free. So I will be able to rapid ingress them, which is really strong with Eradicators because it allows me to rapid ingress them behind a wall. Then they move, and gets them into melta range. So very beneficial to have that on the Eradicators there. And the third character is the Lieutenant with Combi Weapon. This guy is just a super useful piece. He is lone operative. There aren't a whole lot of Space Marine characters that are lone op. For 70 points, he does a whole lot. He does have a counter move, so if someone moves within 9 inches of him, he can make a full move away. And in addition to that, he picks one objective on the battlefield at the start of the game, and I will always reroll wound rolls of 1 for any enemy units that are on that objective, as long as he's still alive. If he gets killed, then that goes away. But I love the fact that he's lone op. Sometimes you just have a mission where your deployment zone objective is out in the open. You just put him on there, and he can keep it, and he won't be shot because you have to be within 12 to shoot him. So a good utility piece. Also, the fact that I can infiltrate with him and redeploy with him because he's a Phobos unit, because of the captain's ability. And a lot of times he'll just go turn 1 and get me area denial or cleanse, or get onto a forward objective. Even if he ends up dying, that means whatever killed him is going to get wrecked in return. So he's a good trade piece as well. Moving on to the next, so this is something new in my DeathWatch list. I have 2 5-man squads of assault intercessors with jump packs. I found these guys to be key, super utility. We know that my list can do a lot of damage, but I need to be able to score by getting on objectives, by getting secondaries, and these guys do all sorts of stuff. So a 5-man squad of assault intercessors with jump pack. They do have deep strike. They do have the 12-inch move. For some reason, there are 2 plasma pistols, in the unit. The sergeant, of course, can take a plasma pistol, but you can take another one or another random guy. So if you just decide to overcharge, you can take it on the random guy and not the sergeant. It's kind of nice. They all have chain swords, and my sergeants have power fists. Now, their special rule is when they complete a charge, they do impact mortals. For every guy that gets into engagement range, you roll a d6 on a 4-up. It is a mortal, a single mortal wound. And I found it kind of handy to have them here because they also do, they're a great subject for the grenade strat because their movement gets them within 8 inches easily. Combining that with their impact mortals means they can often take on and do some damage to pretty tough units. This past weekend, they finished off Gazgul Thraka and Makari by throwing some grenades at him and then charging a different unit. Definitely giving me some clutch units, some clutch points there and some scoring and some kills. Gazgul was only down to 2 wounds, so he didn't have a whole lot, but I figured the grenade would do it. And if somehow I failed that roll, they can do their impact mortals. So they definitely give some utility for killing things. I found they're super useful for going after characters. If someone has lone op characters out on the table, their 12-inch move combined with their little bit of shooting, combined with their impact mortals, combined with their combat, means you can often snipe out and pick up characters. This was great into my matchup this past weekend with Imperial Guard, where I took fixed secondaries, took Assassinate, and as these guys are out jumping around, picking up Tech Priest Engine Seers, last remaining Commissars, that sort of thing. In addition, they're only 80 points, so they're great if you need to get out there and cleanse somewhere, engage on all fronts, and again, just super utility. I've really enjoyed having them on the list. Glad they are here, and they're a new addition. Next, we've got a 5-man of Infiltrators. Infiltrators with a deep strike deny, super key. For many matchups now have not only deep striking, but have the ability to pick up and put down units. So being able to block out at least a chunk of your board with the Infiltrators is key because nobody can deep strike within 12 inches of them. They also have some fun little rules on them. They have a 6-up feel no pain because they're a little medic pack rule. And they also have a comms array. So and the way the comms array is worded is interesting. If you target this unit with a stratagem, roll a d6, and on a 5-up, you get a CP. Well, often they are joined to the captain in Phobos armor, and the strat I often use on them is Armor of Contempt. If anyone targets them, I can use Armor of Contempt for free with the captain because it's a battle tactic strat. Well, I don't spend any CP to do that, but if I do that, I am technically targeting them. So I can roll the d6 and get a 5-up and get a CP back where I didn't even spend any. So it's an interesting little interaction there with the captain leading them. Next, we have a 6-man squad of Eradicators. So the Eradicators, these guys are pretty swingy for me. They're not always super reliable. Usually I'm putting it into vehicles that have that are toughness 10 or higher, because those are the harder targets I put them in. And even though they reroll hits, wounds, and damage into vehicles, they're only strength 9. So you need 5s to wound vehicles. So there's just sometimes you just whiff, even with the rerolls. There have definitely been times in the last couple of weeks where they did great. Pick up a Redemptor Dreadnought or pick up a heavy tank. But I played a game at the league at North Coast Games this past week where they deep struck in and just had to shoot a little Myphitic Blight Hauler, a Death Guard Myphitic Blight Hauler. It's only got 10 wounds. It's only toughness 9. This 6-man Eradicator squad only got 4 wounds, and then he made all 4 of his 5-up invuln saves. So they did nothing. Occasionally that just happens with these. Yeah, you got to be really careful with using them. However, they're the fact that when I bring them in, it's usually on the sustained turn for the army. So they have sustained and lethals and the full rerolls. Quite often they do a lot of damage. They're also a great subject for the Overwatch strat because if a vehicle moves near them, they can still reroll their hits, wounds, and damage. And against vehicles, it doesn't have to be the Oath target, so you can still do that in Overwatch because it's any range of attack. So they are a good subject for that as well. Moving on, we have 6 Devastator Centurions. Man, the Devastator Centurions did some work this past weekend. They're great. The loadout I have here on the 6 of them is each one has 1 twin-linked las cannon. So that's strong as it is. So we get 6 las cannon shots from this unit. So that's strength 12, AP 3, D6 damage, twin linked, so rerolling the wounds. And then they have a Centurion missile launcher on that. So that's D3 shots, but it does have blast. Strength 9, AP 2, D3 damage. Now this weekend, I got to play against Orks running the Green Tide detachment. Basically, my opponent brought 120 boys, so 6 20-man squads of boys. So when these Devastator Centurions got to shoot their missiles, which again are D3 blast, the 6-man unit would get into a 20-man squad, gets 24 shots plus 6 D3. So an average of 36 shots. It's ludicrous with that blast into a 20-man squad. So obviously they have some punch into vehicles. Their special abilities is that they reroll 1s to hit all the time. And if the target is on an objective, they reroll the entire hit roll, essentially giving myself another Oath of Moment target. The Eradicators reroll all their hits in the vehicles and monsters. The Devs Sense reroll all their hits on the subjects on the targets that are on objectives. And plus I have my regular Oath of Moment. It just means my army is extremely consistent at hitting whatever it is they want to hit. Next we have 30 Stern Guard. So yeah, this is kind of the backbone of my ridiculous list here. This is the backbone of the DevWatch. The Stern Guard are just regular Space Marines, and they're T4, 2 wounds, 3 up armor. They have a Stern Guard Bolter. There's another bolter you can take. You can take a Combi Bolter, but I prefer the Stern Guard Bolter, so I'm just going to talk about that. The Stern Guard Bolter is 2 shots, strength 4, AP 1, 1 damage. Rapid fire 1. So if you're within 12 inches, you get 3 shots. Now, they also have devastating wounds. So I put these guys in drop pods. They drop in, and on the turn I do Tome of Ectoclades. I usually pop my sustained hits for the whole army as well. So they reroll all hits into these Tome of Ectoclades targets. Reroll all hits with sustained, then reroll all wounds with devastating, meaning they put out a ton of devastating wounds. Each 10-man squad also has 2 heavy bolters. The heavy bolters have devastating wounds as well, just because they're part of the Stern Guard squads. So it's a total of 30 shots with devastating wounds, 6 of which are 2 damage dev wound shots. Meaning all these Stern Guard put out, when they're within rapid fire range, put out 90 shots with dev wounds. As you can see, they can do a lot of damage when I'm re-rolling wounds. Now they natively re-roll 1s to wound against the Oath of Moment target. And the bolters, decent otherwise, they're still AP1. I have some DeathWatch strats where I can improve the bolters, although I can't give them anti-infantry 2-up because they have dev wounds. But being able to extend their range by 6 inches and give them extra AP is always useful, especially if I'm trying to get them into rapid fire range to give me those extra shots. And then, of course, we have the 3 drop pods that they go into. The drop pods are great. They allow them to deep strike. They can deep strike on turn 1, and there are often times when I'm using them turn 1 if I need to put the pressure on my opponent early, and super useful for that. They interestingly, I haven't taken advantage of the fact that they are not dedicated transports. The drop pods are not dedicated transports, so you could just drop them in empty. which might be an interesting thing to try sometime. Haven't done that yet, but we'll see. They also have ROC2, so they do hold objectives if that's the case, if I need them to. And they have a storm bolter so they can shoot, which means they can do actions. A lot of times they'll cleanse or deploy teleport homers or something along those lines, do an action. And then, or when we play the ritual, they will plant objectives as well. And then finally, we have one tank in the army. We've got the Gladiator Reaper. I knew I was playing against DJ's all mech list here today, but the Reaper is really strong, even if it's not going into an all infantry build. Of course, he's got a bunch of grots, so it'll be great for chewing through some of the grots. But the Gladiator Reaper has a twin-linked heavy onslaught Gatling cannon as its main weapon, so it's 12 shots, strength 6, AP 0, 1 damage. It does have devastating wounds and twin-linked, so it always rerolls its wound rolls, and it's always anti-infantry. Anytime it shoots its infantry, it is sustained 2 on the main weapon. It also has some bolter shots, a stubber, and a missile pod, so it has a fair amount of other shots. I found it is nice to just have some extra devastating wounds in addition to the stern guard coming in. But it's also nice to have a vehicle sometimes to just kind of move block things or put it out as kind of a tempting target for people to try to shoot at. So I definitely like having it. And again, it just gives me that, gets me over 100 devastating wound potential output, or 100 devastating wound shots, not devastating wounds, but shots that have devastating wounds in the army. All right, guys, that is the list. As I said, the new addition here is the jump intercessors. I just finished painting them up today, actually. They are super utility in 10th edition 40K, being able to go out and score secondaries and primaries. They're not super durable, but 80 points for a 5-man. I'm okay with trading them for things because usually they trade up. They are really good at interacting with other junk or skirmish units because they usually win in a fight against them. Between a little bit of shooting from their pistols, some dev wounds on the charge, and their close combat attacks, they will usually wreck most 5-man units that they're meeting out in the middle of the table. They do have a little bit of trouble in the tougher stuff. I found with some orcs, they can have a challenge because they're usually punching up in terms of their strength is 4 on most of their pistols and the chain swords, so they're wounding orc stuff on 5s. So that can be a little bit of a challenge, but most of the time, if someone's got a small cheap unit in the middle of the table, they'll be able to engage them pretty well. Like scout units, they usually win the fight between the scout units and the assault intercessors with jump packs. So we'll see how they perform today. They have a lot of grots they can get into. We'll see how they perform on secondaries. So stick around for the post game after the game to see how we talk a little bit about how they perform. And as far as what I'm looking to see in this game today, the DevWatch damage output is really strong, of course, for its one big turn. But DJ's list is mostly a bunch of vehicles in terms of a Gorkanaut, a Morkanaut, 18 kilocans, and then help me out here, guys. The Meganobs. The Meganobs will be coming out as well, and the Meganobs are basically like vehicles because they're durability. They're 2-up armor, and they have some durability tricks as well, including their 4-up feel no pain during the law. So there are some grots on the table. I won't have any trouble with the grots, but after I have my big Tome of Ectoclades turn, I might have some struggle into the rest of the vehicles, depending on what I have left. Because if DJ is able to pick up my Eradicators and DevSense, or reduce them, or tie them up somehow, the rest of what I have is mostly a bunch of bolters. I do have the ability for one turn to go lethal hits on everything, so I can do some working damage. But the bolters will be wounding the cans on 5-ups, but the Gorkanauts, that's going to be tough. It's going to be 6s. So I'm a little worried about that, actually. I feel like I have the damage output. We're going to have to really see what happens in the game here. I know that I can hit really hard for one turn, but I don't know how it's going to work for all the other turns. So I think it'll still be an interesting game to watch. Now, there's no other really tricks I'm looking here at DevWatch. If you've been watching the channel, you know that DevWatch hits really hard for turn. Usually picks up 3 to 4 units. in a single turn of shooting usually the biggest and toughest units, because I'm re-rolling all my hits and wounds, and I usually pop sustained off for that turn as well. So the whole army is sustained, hits, re-rolling hits and wounds, and the 2 key targets that I'm pulling all my devastating wound weapons into, which means I can usually push through, as I've said, 30 to 35 devastated wounds in one big turn. I mean, I don't care what my opponent's toughness is, I don't care what their armor save is, I don't care what their invuln save is. Damage reduction really doesn't matter, except on the heavy bolter dev wounds, because most everything else is just 1 wound. So it really allows me to push out that damage into targets that otherwise can't really be damaged very easily. But again, I'm going into a lot of vehicles here, so I'm going to have to choose my targets very wisely when I pull that Tome of Ectoplade's turn. And I am worried about the Mega Knobs, because they can really wreck. They can punch really well, and they'll shred through my Stern Guard pretty easily without my Stern Guard being able to do a whole lot back. So follow me over to the battle report, guys, to see how we do into the DeathWatch. And as I said, I'm also putting up another video just to talk through my games and the tournament I won at the Sweets and Geeks this past weekend. All right, see you there.